The United States is now at war with Iran. It's war on their terms, but war nonetheless. We've got some insight into a possible ceasefire deal in Gaza, and a new poll asks Americans their thoughts as to whether or not a genocide is occurring in Gaza. The results are very different from most of the reports I've seen. Thought that was worth diving into. So let's get into it. I'm recording this at 9:30 a.m. Central on Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, starting with what is now, I believe, a war between the United States and Iran, just maybe not as most people expected it to play out. We're going to look at the Houthis down in Yemen. Overnight, U.S. Central Command announced that they conducted strikes against 2 Houthi anti-ship missiles that were aimed into the southern Red Sea, presenting an imminent threat to merchant vessels and U.S. Navy ships in the region. Central Command said the U.S. forces subsequently struck and destroyed those missiles in self-defense. This, I believe, is the 9th strike total carried out by U.S. and or U.K. forces against Houthi military targets in the last couple weeks. The Pentagon spokesperson, Major General Ryder, said that these strikes from a physical standpoint are having an impact on the Houthis' ability to attack, which, yes, right? If they have 1,000 missiles and we destroy 2 of them, that has a physical impact on their ability to attack. They have 2 fewer missiles. Again, I'd be pretty hesitant to say that a significant portion of the Houthi missile and drone stockpiles at this point have been degraded. We heard yesterday a report through BBC saying that Western intelligence said that 30% of the Houthi missile and drone stocks have been destroyed or damaged in these U.S. and U.K. strikes. I'm going to stand by the assessment. I think that's a little bit high. But either way, what we're trying to get at here from airstrikes and missile strikes into Houthi territory is not the complete elimination of their ability to strike into the Red Sea, because we are never going to be able to do that through these means. That would require boots on the ground, and I don't think that's in the cards right now. So really what these strikes would be determined, or the goal of these strikes would be to convince the Houthis that it's not worth continuing. At some point, they're losing too many of their missiles. Too many military facilities are being struck that it's not worth continuing launching strikes into the Red Sea. Now, there's an article that came out yesterday in Reuters and the Financial Times saying that the United States has asked China repeatedly for help in curbing the attacks in the Red Sea. I guess the U.S. had urged them to pressure Tehran to try to rein in the Houthis to no real avail at all. According to that article, U.S. officials believe that China hasn't really done much of anything and is just kind of letting this whole thing play out for now, which isn't really a shock. But China also does have some military resources in the Red Sea, a couple ships, I believe. They're there. I don't believe they're not a part of Prosperity Guardian. They're definitely not a part of the Poseidon Archer that is firing missiles and dropping bombs into Houthi territory. I don't believe they're not a part of that defensive alliance either. But either way, sounds like China's just going to let this go and see what happens. But this is part of, again, what I believe now is a war between the United States and Iran. Been simmering for a long time, but this process of these proxy forces, these Iranian partners engaging U.S. forces and disrupting U.S. operations around the world, that is the Iranian strategy. That's their goal. These proxy forces, and we're going to get into more of them here in a second, that is part of how Iran's defensive structure is built up. That is part of their military capabilities. Iran's military force is not just their conventional military inside of their borders. Far from it. They have built this layered defense across the region that have included partners like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and a major group in Iraq, Kataib Hezbollah. So more on that group. Yesterday, Central Command announced that in response to the attacks carried out by this group, Kataib Hezbollah, on the Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq on January 20th, U.S. forces conducted unilateral airstrikes, so just the United States in this case, as opposed to some of those strikes against Houthi targets carried out by U.S. and U.K. forces. They said the U.S. targeted facilities used by Kataib Hezbollah, as well as other Iranian-affiliated groups in Iraq. These strikes targeted headquarters, storage, and training locations for rocket, missile, and one-way attack UAV capabilities. So Kataib Hezbollah is there. So many interlapping things, so it gets kind of confusing. I'll try to make it simple, but provide some depth, but also try to make this simple. Kataib Hezbollah is part of the Hezbollah brigades, kind of a proxy of Lebanese Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran. They are also a part of the axis of resistance at this point, right? That includes Iran, all of their proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and I think a few more. They are rolled up. Kind of the most immediate structure here is the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which is a grouping of Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. So they're kind of, you're going to hear them referred to in all these different lights. Kataib Hezbollah is the specific group. They kind of fall under all of those different organizations. Again, this is one of the layers of Iranian defense. We have, I think, over time, kind of downplayed the capabilities of these organizations. Kataib Hezbollah is a militia. That is the best way to describe that organization. And I think when we use the term militia, we think AK-47s, IEDs, maybe RPGs and mortars. And we know these guys have some rockets, maybe a couple drones now because everybody has drones. I wouldn't sleep on them. I wouldn't sleep on any of these Iranian proxies. I think what we're seeing out of Yemen at this point, the capabilities of the Houthis, anti-ship ballistic missiles are no joke. That's a significant capability. I heard an assessment recently that the missile stockpiles in Houthi-controlled territory of Yemen might be more advanced, more sophisticated than what Hezbollah has. That's wild, because Hezbollah has a lot and pretty advanced stuff, all things considered. These groups are on the receiving end of significant modern military technology from Iran. Again, this is a very different structure than we're used to in the United States. The reason that Iran is backing these groups is to prevent direct conflict with the United States or other major countries in the region. Iran allows their proxies, they fund, they equip, and they give them these advanced military capabilities to be able to conduct strikes like they did, like Kataib Hezbollah did against Al-Assad Air Base just a few days ago. So the U.S. then strikes those groups instead of striking any targets inside of Iran. It is very hard at this point, with the U.S. and U.K. and other allies going back and forth with groups like the Houthis, with Kataib Hezbollah and other Islamic resistance groups in Iraq, to say that that is not Iran. These are layers of Iranian defense that they have built, they have trained, they have put in place, and to a degree are probably dictating when and how they carry out those attacks. So again, I think a lot of people, when they think of a United States war with Iran, we're talking about stealth fighters flying over, bombing targets inside of Iranian territory. Not this, but this is what war with Iran looks like when it's on their terms. When they determine how the war is going to be fought, it's going to be fought with these proxies. And right now, we're trading blows left and right. What was it yesterday? 83 American service members so far wounded in these attacks by Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. At what point does it require a death to call it war? I know we're not going to get an official declaration of war. We don't really do that at all anymore. But just given the intensity of the fighting between the United States, some of our allies, Iran and their proxies, it's hard to deny at this point that this is, at the very least, a low-level war being waged between the U.S. and Iran. All right, then turning to Israel, looking at operations on the ground, IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Hagari said yesterday that Israeli forces killed over 100 Hamas militants during operations throughout the Gaza Strip, mostly in the southern area around Khan Yunis. Israel also says they uncovered a 1.5-kilometer-long tunnel under Khan Yunis used to manufacture rockets. And we're starting to see a lot more tunnel footage come out from Israel almost every day, to where they're showing areas where hostages have been held, showing areas where military equipment is being stored or manufactured. And a lot of these, which should not be any surprise, are under residential civilian infrastructure. It's just the nature of the beast in Gaza. The scope of these tunnels, how many tunnels there are, they're not all going to be out in the countryside. They're going to be throughout the city. And in the city, you have homes, you have hospitals, you have schools, you have mosques. And that's where a lot of these tunnels are being discovered in and around. Then Hamas released some footage that they say was from the attack yesterday that killed 24 Israeli soldiers. There's not a lot here in this video to confirm or deny that it's exactly from that event. I have heard a couple different kind of competing claims at this point. Israel has put out some statements that these soldiers were rigging the building for detonation to bring it down. And in the process, a Hamas RPG or mortar made its way into the building, set off one of those charges, kind of a chain reaction, brought the whole building down on top of those soldiers. There were some Hamas statements on some of their channels talking about how they had kind of set it up and rigged the building. Not sure if that's necessarily the case, but either way, again, yesterday, I believe, to this point, with 24 Israeli soldiers killed in one day, is the deadliest day since ground operations began in Gaza. Now, we did get some news and have gotten news over the last few days that a ceasefire might be in the works at some point. According to a report put out in Reuters, Israel and Hamas have broadly agreed in principle that an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners could take place during a month-long ceasefire. But the framework plan is still being held up by the two sides' differences on how to bring a permanent end to the Gaza war. This is big. This is notable. I don't believe in the last series of negotiations there were any significant pushes to fully end the war or any real conversations about that happening. There always have been voices saying, what can we do just to end this thing? But the last one was very much a small number of hostages being released, small number of Palestinians held in Israeli captivity being released for just a few days of no fighting. It sounds like, to a degree, both sides are trying to get something in this series of negotiations to actually end this war. It sounds like a phased approach right now is being discussed with different categories of Israeli hostages. That would start with civilians and then end with Israeli soldiers being released in return for a break in hostilities, release of Palestinian prisoners. I've not seen a number put on that. Some of the requests by Hamas at this point has been all Palestinians held by Israel being released, which the number's in the thousands at this point for sure, and then more aid to Gaza. It sounds like right now Hamas has refused to move forward with this plan until the conditions for a permanent ceasefire are agreed on. So we'll see if that ends up being a stopping point or if there's something the two sides can agree on to at least move this thing forward just a little bit. It says, while Israel has sought to negotiate one stage at a time, Hamas is seeking a package deal that agrees a permanent ceasefire before hostages are released during the initial phase. One offer by Israel is to end the war if Hamas removes 6 senior leaders from Gaza. However, Hamas has absolutely rejected that proposal. Additionally, Reuters sources said Israel has refused to discuss any end of the war that did not include Hamas being dismantled. So it doesn't sound like Israel has changed much from their initial aims of the war, which gives me a little pause when seeing any conversation around ending hostilities through negotiation, because it does still seem like Israel's plan of Hamas has to be gone. They can no longer be there at all in the Gaza Strip. That seems like something that Hamas is not willing to take on. It's possible that is where any complete end to the hostilities is going to get hung up. But again, as mentioned yesterday, the conversation is ongoing. Never know. Maybe we'll get some positive news there before too long. So I noticed the change in how this war is being presented on Al Jazeera that I thought was worth bringing up. So I check Al Jazeera today and most days to kind of try to get their perspective on how things are playing out in Gaza and across the Middle East. One of many, many sources to check in on each day. And I noticed that they changed how they're referring to this war. So the section for this war at the top of the page used to be called Israel-Gaza War. And I had to go back, use the internet Wayback Machine to confirm this because it just looked like something was different. I wasn't sure what. It used to be Israel-Gaza War, and then the title below that was Israel-Palestine Conflict. They changed that sometime in the last couple weeks, and I've got the screenshot up here from previously. This first screenshot's from January 1st, and then this screenshot is from today, January 24th. They changed that header to Israel War on Gaza, which I think changes how the war would be viewed, right? It's like a little change, but also pretty significant. And I think how the war is being presented in terms of the Israeli objectives, what the war is about, what the goals of this war are. Anyways, thought that was notable. Thought that was caught my attention. Thought it was worth bringing up. All right, so I came across a poll last week that is kind of in contradiction to most headlines that I see across traditional media, social media, and all across the internet around the genocide question in Gaza. And I thought it was worth bringing up. It caught my attention again because it was very different from what I normally see. That doesn't mean that this is right and everything else is wrong, right? Anytime you get that one outlier, you got to be pretty cautious with how you approach it. So take it with a grain of salt, but I thought it was worth presenting just because I think it paints a little different picture than what we normally see in the media. Let me know what you think. So this was a YouGov poll conducted last week, January 12th through 17th, 2024, 1,000 U.S. adult citizens. They asked, do you consider the way the following people were treated in the specified time and place to be a genocide? Arabs in the Gaza Strip, 32% yes, 32% no. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, 40% yes, 30% no. So they split that question out, changing Arabs and Palestinians. 50% got the question Arabs, 50% got the question Palestinians. So an interesting piece there is if you use the term Palestinians, more people believe that they are experiencing a genocide in the Gaza Strip. But then if you move up just a little bit from that, Jewish people in Israel, 35% yes, 37% no. So that I feel like is not what I normally see in headlines. So starting top to bottom, 32% say Arabs in the Gaza Strip are experiencing a genocide. 35% say Jewish people in Israel are experiencing a genocide. And 40% say Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are experiencing a genocide. Those numbers are, I mean, I feel like somebody can look at this and kind of pick apart all the stuff between the yes, no variation and the not sures and all that. But those numbers are a lot closer together than I thought they would be, just based off of the headlines, the press coverage that I see, at least here in U.S. media, maybe is the best way to put it. But again, it's kind of an outlier when it comes to polls, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. Interested in your thoughts. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in any of this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out my Substack. Link is in the description below. We're starting to put together more detailed, in-depth articles that are complementary to the subjects I talk about in these videos for free. They're available to everyone. So I think they're going to be a really good value. Go check them out if interested. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.